Okay, good afternoon and welcome. I think we're on time. We'll just get started with our webinar series for this afternoon. So this is the monthly webinar series from IR Lab India, which is from the CII Center of Excellence for Sustainable Development. And our topic for today is integrated reporting and intangible capitals. Little brief background about our speakers for today. I will get you started. I'm Rishali Gaur, and I work with CII at the IR Lab India, and have those of you, some of you have heard me before, or kind of know a little bit about my background in different corporate and social sectors, and that I work in business and sustainability areas at CII. And our main speaker today, our guest speaker today, is Professor Stefano Zambon. He has a very illustrious resume. He's currently the chair of accounting and business economics at university in Italy. He's very engaged in the topic of intangible capitals. As you can see, he's been a keynote speaker across the globe. He's a founding member of the World Intellectual Capital Initiative. He's Secretary General of the Italian Network of Integrated Reporting, and so forth. So we're excited to have him here. And I'll start off with a few slides and then hand it over to Professor Stefano to continue from there. Okay. Before we begin, for those of you who may not know about the IR Lab India, it's a collaboration between the CII Center and the International Integrated Reporting Council, IIRC. The main focus of our initiative has been to increase awareness and, of course, adoption of IR in India. And we do that through memberships, through knowledge sharing, through training, advocacy, and a lot of other means throughout the year. A lot of those who are calling in today are already members or in some way or the other involved with the IR Lab India. So thank you for those who support, and thank you for those who've called in to listen to us. Our agenda for today, what I'll do is I'm going to start with the value creation model. It's kind of, we do a regular IR introduction primer to IR webinar, and we kind of give an overview of IR there, but I'm going to take a few points from there, talk about value creation model, talk about the 6 capitals, and then hand it over to Professor Stefano to kind of deep dive into intangible capitals, and specifically the wiki framework that his organization has been doing leading work in. So let's start a little bit with a very simple primer to IR. Most of you probably are familiar with it, but I'll go through as to why IR and what is IR. Why? So businesses create value in a lot of different ways. The most common one we all affiliate to is the financial value for its investors or owners. But there's a lot of other value it creates for its employees, the community, the customers, the client. And this value can be in many different ways. It can be through standard of living, security, through the products, lifestyle, and so. And a good understanding of how this concept of value has changed. If you look at the graph there at the bottom left corner, it shows how over the past 40 years, the proportion of value of that businesses hold in tangible and intangible assets. And by tangible, it refers to your financial, your assets, your products, and so forth. Intangibles is everything else. Those are relationships, your community, and the worth you create. So as you can see, a lot more value for business today resides in intangible assets. And that makes kind of capture those intangible assets very critical, and that's kind of where integrated reporting comes in. Another way as to why integrated reporting is important is to do with the fact that the information gaps that remain between what a company reports and what users of this capital need. So one good way of looking at this is through a current, if you look on the left side, we have the reporting content that a company typically puts out. Strategic issues, forecasts, a big chunk of it is past performance. But what does a user, the investor, or the stakeholder who who reads this report is looking for. They're using it more for the long-term strategy. They're using it more for planning. They need to know what the company, how it's creating value and how it's going to continue creating value in the future. So this discrepancy between what a business thinks they should report on and what an investor requires is another big gap that we believe that the IR framework can help address. So, if we look at the, we typically cover this in a lot more detail in our other webinars, but between the capturing of intangible value and the information gaps from the investor, coupled with the fact that there's a lot more disclosures but a lot less quality and relevant information sharing through reports, I think all of it kind of leads the way towards why there is a need for evolution in corporate reporting. And that brings me very quickly to, what is IR? And, what is IR? Very simply put, it is, if you look at one side, you have the financial reporting, which is what currently annual reports are very focused on. And then you also have a lot of the other reports that we see coming out, whether it's GRI. In India, we have the business responsibility report. Some places it may be CDP. Depending on which jurisdiction in the world you are, you might have the SASB, the ESG, in different formats. But you need something that combines this together and puts it in the perspective of an organization, its business model, how it's being governed, and where it's going in the future, the prospect. And so to us, what integrated reporting is that process which combines these things together and ultimately comes out in the form of a report. So integrated reporting is the internal process that results in the external reporting of your entire value, how a business creates value in the short, medium, and long term. Now, what is integrated reporting comprise of? So there's key elements in the IR framework. You've got the fundamental concepts, which is your value creation model. The 6 capitals are part of that value creation model, and there's a group of guiding principles to follow through in an IR process, and there is a list of content elements that should ideally be looked and presented in your report. So the principle helps with the process, the content element helps in the writing of the report, and both of these together try and explain to the reader the value creation process of a company. What is the value creation process and the 6 capitals? That's where we are going to focus on at this particular time. So the value creation process, I think most of us in business are familiar with the concept of how value is created. You have inputs, you have your process, and you have your outputs. The IR framework kind of looks at little beyond outputs into outcomes, which goes beyond what traditional outputs of product, service, and finances to outcomes such as impact on society, impact on environment, and the overall relationship you have, with the community and so forth. And so if you see the value creation process, the 6 capital comes on the input side and the output on the outcome side. You take money, natural resources, human resources, and then you follow through your business model, and then in the same process, the same 6 capitals are impacted to different degrees. If you're manufacturing, you're probably increasing your manufacturer capital, decreasing financial, using up natural capital, but at the same time improving the community and society at large. So different ways, different processes impact these capitals. I'll go on to the meat of this particular webinar, which will be the 6 capitals. The 6 capitals in integrated reporting: financial, manufactured, intellectual, social relationship, human, and natural capital. And there's different, between academic and businesses, there's different ways at how these are structured and looked at and the interactions between them. But there is general consensus that the natural, financial, and manufactured capital are those which can be in some way or the other measured, and they're very tangible in terms of what you're using, what you're impacting. But there is the intellectual, social, and human capital that sort of becomes a little bit more intangible, and classified that way. Of course, the classifications kind of vary depending upon different thought processes, but our focus today will be to not look at those which are traditionally talked about very often, the financial, manufactured, and natural, but those which are kind of new to the integrated reporting framework and a little bit more challenging to understand and capture for businesses. And that would be the intangible capitals. So that's where Professor Stefano comes in. I'm again very grateful to have him here today, and I'm going to just hand it over to him. So just bear with me for a minute while we do this transfer of moving presenters to Professor Stefano. Professor Stefano, I think you do have presenter rights now. If you could go ahead and share your screen, and then either from there.
I hope it's coming now.
Yes, we can see your screen perfectly.
Is that okay?
Yes, we can see it.
On then. Okay.
Yes.
So should start then. Thank you very much, Bruciali, and thank you very much, of course, to Confederation of Indian Industry. It's always a pleasure and an honor to be here with you today. I'm also particularly pleased about the fact that our collaboration keeps on increasing. Recently, we've been collaborating on a document on integrated thinking that has been successfully released a few weeks ago and presented also to the IRC. And today, of course, I have the difficult task to talk to people about a very difficult concepts, because, of course, intangible capitals are probably not the easiest concept. Hopefully, next time I will talk to you in person, because I always like to talk to people in person. But I hope you can hear me all right. Is that all right, Rushali? Can I move on?
Yes, that is all right.
Hello?
You can move on. I think you're... Hello?
Okay. Okay. Yes, yes. I'm here.
You're fine. Yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I'll go ahead. Okay, why intangibles are important? Just a few data from the American context. Clearly, the blue line represents the intangible investments, and the red line represents the tangible investments. You can see that the rate of intangible investments has overtaken since at least 15 years the investments in tangible goods. This is true for United States. The next one is from UK. UK, same thing. You see the intangibles in this case are the red, and you can see that also in the UK context, intangible investments are exceeding tangible investments. This is, of course, a macro view, but still, I think represents well the importance of the topic we are discussing today. Already in 1994, a company called Skandia, Swedish company from Sweden, it was an insurance company, asked itself this simple question: why my market value is different from the value that is recorded, that is in my accounting books? Why the market value is far superior, is far higher than the accounting value? And their answer already in 1994 is the fact that the financial market was able to evaluate somehow their intangibles, and they constructed this tree that you have in front of your eyes, trying to understand why the market value is higher than the accounting value of the company. So coming to the point of today's discussion, I would like to introduce to you this organization. Is a network. It's called World Intellectual Capital or Assets Initiative Wiki for the friends, and we started in 2007, but we officially signed memorandum of understanding in 2008. Who are the composing parts of Wiki, of this global network? There's from the US, the American Institute of Certified Public Accountants, Microsoft, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and Grant Thornton. You can see from the European Financial Analyst, EFAS, the Japanese Ministry of Economy, Trade and Industry, METI, Society for Knowledge Economics Australia, my university, University of Ferrara, and Waseda University is a university based in Tokyo. As observers, we have European Commission, the OECD, the Brazilian Development Bank. We have a structure, despite being a network. It happens that I am the global chair in this period of time. But the most important thing is what you can see down that slide, where there are wiki organizations in different jurisdictions. We have Wiki Japan, Wiki United States, Wiki Italy, Wiki France. Probably from next year, we're going to have also Wiki Germany. We are just negotiating right now about this. So the vision is, of course, is improving company reporting for representing value creation and hence capital allocation through better corporate reporting information, which sounds very similar to IRC. In fact, IRC was born, as you know, in in August 2010. We born a little bit before, but as you can see, it's very similar aim. So the goal is first to develop a new global framework for measuring and reporting intangibles and corporate performance, because we think that intangibles are completely underreported, which is incredible. The second is to develop guidelines for measuring and reporting industry-specific KPIs, key performance indicators. So we provide guidance about indicators in our documents for companies. And the third is to use XBRL taxonomies to translate all these documents in XBRL for facilitating the usage. The global aim is, of course, to improve capital allocation decisions, also within the companies, not only between the companies and the investors, but also we think there's a possibility of improving significantly the management and reporting of value creation, and in particular with an intangibles focus, also inside the company. So where do we locate ourselves? We locate ourselves, you see, on the bottom, on the higher part of the sort of there's the financial reporting, and the bottom side is non-financial reporting. We stay of course, in the financial reporting world. There's all the international accounting standards, international valuation standards council. But in the non-financial reporting, there's sustainability, which of course you know quite well, GRI, SASB, ISO, Global Compact, and all the things that Rushali had just mentioned. And also there's a more interest in the value creation area, which is basically what Wiki is trying to do. On the left-hand side, you can see there's IRC, the International Integrated Reporting Council, trying to connect all these different approaches in one document. And XBRL on the right-hand side is basically the technology. So what we did is to produce a framework after 1.5 years of work, because we thought that there was a need for a new document covering all the intangibles reporting. Let me immediately clarify that this is not against national reporting framework, but is a companion framework. So basically, we try to work and operate in a way to reinforce and strengthen the integrated reporting framework. As you will see, there's nothing going against the integrated reporting framework. We just have a little disagreement of one little definition, I will show you in a minute. But it's important to understand that this is something that complements integrated reporting framework. The background is that for what Rushali just said, that basically from today, financial information, we cannot see many things. The origin of company competitiveness, its value creation as a combination of company-specific intangibles, the sustainability, the capacity of remaining in the market, the long-term value creation capacity, And clearly, it's difficult to evaluate a company. You remember the Scandia, the Swedish company, a few minutes ago. Scandia was posing itself exactly the same question. How can I be evaluated in a proper way if I don't show basically information on my intangibles that are the pillars for the long-term value creation? Therefore, we try to develop this framework based on the concept of business sustainability of a company. What is a business sustainability of a company? Is just you have a look at this simple figure. Basically, this is the somehow can be seen also what the integrated report is trying to do. So trying to portray, trying to represent the business sustainability of an organization, the sustainability in the long term, of the long-term value creation, if you prefer. I think they are kind of similar concepts. On the right-hand side, you have a natural societal capital. On the left-hand side, you have knowledge and intellectual capital, basically intangibles. And of course, on top, you have business model and governance. So it's a simplified model vis-a-vis that of IRC value creation octopus that Rushali just shown to you. So this is the basic concept. We would like to favor, with our framework, the representation, the business sustainability of a company. Where do we locate ourselves vis-a-vis the integrated reporting? Is basically what also Rushali already reminded to us. Basically, there's a number of six capitals that are on the bottom of the slide. IRC, of course, has these 6 capitals. What we would like to develop here to better represent, to give some guidance in terms of reporting, is on human capital, intellectual capital, and relationship, basically capital. The social capital is more about sustainability reporting. One important detail is that intellectual capital in our framework is called organizational capital. So if you hear organizational capital, think that we're just talking about intellectual capital in the IRC framework terms. Okay, so we focus exactly on this 2.5 capitals, if you want, because we think that these are underreported and probably there was a need for some guidance. So basically, we wanted to fill the reporting gap. And basically, what we want to do is not to go for valuation. We don't want to put dollar value or euro value on everything. What we want to develop, especially, is a non-financial or non-monetary information on intangibles. In some cases, some intangibles are really, soft, but we all understand that it's important. Think about employee commitment or employee working climate. These things cannot be really put. We think that you can express this in euros or dollars or sterling pounds, but you can measure these things, and the reporting of these things on employee satisfaction and the like help an investor, help management understand better the value creation mechanism of a company. So we focus especially on non-financial information. Another important thing is that we didn't want to reinvent the wheel. Around the globe, you've seen that our organization stretches from Japan to United States to Europe. We tried to collect the best practices. Didn't want to reinvent the wheel. And so the framework is basically what we call WIRF, Wiki Intangibles Reporting Framework. WIRF crystallizes in one conceptually consistent framework the best practices and proposals around the world. And it's so true that our basic points reference will be the Japanese guidelines on intellectual assets-based management, 2005, the US-based EBRC Enhanced Business Reporting Consortium Framework is about end of the 90s. The Principles for Effective Communication of Intellectual Capital by the European Financial Analysts, the EFAS, and finally, of course, the Integrated Reporting International Framework. These are being the four polar stars, if I may use this expression. We went through a quite long and complex international consultation period We follow the due process. There are all the dates there. We receive 16 responses that are very significant from IRC, SASB, CDSB, Ernst & Young, KPMG, Ernst & Bank, that is a big bank in Eastern Europe. So we had a number of quite significant responses. We adapted, we revisited, of course, the framework on the basis of the responses from stakeholders. And this is finally the table of contents. The table of contents, you see that there's 1, 2, 3, 4 chapters, and there are some appendices that we think that are very important, very useful, and of course there's finally even a glossary to make sure that our concepts are clear. So the basic, just going through quickly the various chapters, the WIRF, the established definition, principles, contents, and structure of reporting for intangibles. Of course, reporting that intangibles that are material for an organization's value creation process and its communication to stakeholders. It's principle-based, as you know, it's not rule-based, meaning that we offer you the principles according to which intangibles should be reported, and he addresses all companies and other organizations in the private, public, and not-for-profit sector. So it's a quite wide range, similar to what integrated reporting framework is. An important element is what is the goal? Is of course is to offer useful information for decision making, and in particular resource allocation decisions. But not only to providers of financial capital, not only to external investors, but also to management. Because as I said, let me repeat myself, we think that management itself can have a benefit to adopt much better reporting on intangibles. So we have both sides, both internal and external, that this framework would like to cover. The kind of intuition is that at the moment there's a gap. You can see the left-hand side figure. There's a gap between what the corporation would like to distribute, would like to disseminate in terms of information, what the market would like to desire in terms of information for decision making. So hopefully our framework will give a little contribution towards closing down this reporting gap. So this is the basically intuition. Definition: intangibles are non-physical resources that either alone or in conjunction with other tangible or intangible resources can generate positive or negative effect on value creation of the organization, the short, medium, and long term. Once again, please, it's quite important that we recognize the fact intangibles are not only brands, patents, things that are quite well, or goodwill, things that we know very well also from financial accounting. Intangibles is a much richer word that goes into know-how, it goes into organizational climate, it goes into leadership, even business model is an intangible, if you think about it. So intangibles are really here considering a very wide conception, a very wide interpretation. When we talk about value, we try to make a little step forward in comparison to the integrated reporting framework. We try to define what is value. In our view, value has two faces, two sides that of course are connected over time. One is a strategic value that is related to the enhancement of competitive market, product, reputation, or the risk profile of the organization. If your risk profile organization is better now, is of course some strategic value, and of course the financial value. We all know that net cash flows, of course, is a very accepted definition of financial value. So the strategic value and financial value, both are important. They are connected over time, of course, but at the same time, I think we thought that it was important to distinguish clearly between the two. And another important thing that I would like to propose to your attention is the fact that intangibles are not necessarily owned or controlled by an organization. Let's talk about organizational climate, working conditions, and so on. These are not necessarily controlled. I mean, the organizational climate can be influenced by the leaders, by the managers of an organization, but the organizational climate is not owned or controlled can be influenced. So what are we trying to say here? It's an important step in the capitalism, we think, because the concept of intangible capital, it's enough to be available or utilized by the organization to generate value. It's not enough, it's not necessary that an intangible is controlled. Some cases intangibles are not controlled by the organization, but the organization happens to be to use this resource. This is a new concept of capital. Intangible capital is not linked to ownership, is not linked to control, but is linked to availability. In this respect, we also define intellectual capital in a wider perspective compared to the framework of integrated reporting. This is the only difference really with the integrated reporting framework. There are no other particular differences really, because we think that intellectual capital is something to do with knowledge, and knowledge clearly encompasses both internal and external intangibles that are dynamically interrelated and available to an organization. I just explained the sense of available, thereby enabling this organization to transform a set of tangible, financial, and human resources into a system capable of pursuing sustainable value creation. So we, compared to our friends of IRC, we try to give a much wider perspective to intellectual capital, linking intellectual capital to all intangibles, basically. Of course, I mean, this might create a little confusion, but I think when the purpose of our definition is clear, I think it's easy to reconcile the two. Intellectual capital, then, in this wider vision, has three main categories, which is human capital, relational capital, and organizational capital. You can recognize human capital from the IRC. Relational capital is part of the social and relational and relationship capital, and organizational capital, which corresponds to the intellectual capital as defined by IRC. I hope to be clear, but there's no fundamental difference. It's just a different definition. Boundaries of these categories, of course, are flexible, should not be taken as solid and rigid boxes, of course. There are positive intangible resources. Of course, what very often is they're called intangible assets, but we prefer to be more wider. Intangible assets is an accounting term, so we prefer to use positive intangible resources. And of course, as you may well imagine, there are negative intangible resources that have a substantive negative impact on organizational strategic and or financial value. Think about bad reputation of an organization. Think about poor management quality and leadership. These are negative intangibles. Intangibles are not always positive. And of course, negative sources, please, this is an important point, are often linked to the specific risks of an entity. Which are the basic reporting principles and principles in the context of intangibles? Here we made a very important decision, quite radical. We did not want to issue new reporting principles. We thought the reporting principles already in the IRC framework, in the integrated reporting framework, are more than enough. What we try to do, though, is to interpret some of these reporting principles in the context, in the light of intangibles. So, for instance, materiality, we try to define materiality, not to define materiality, but to give some guidance for companies and managers to adapt materiality principles, that is very well-known principle, in the context when you report intangibles. So same thing for connectivity. Connectivity is one of the basic principles of reporting principles, of course, of integrated reporting. Is what makes a report integrated. Without connectivity of information, we can't have really integrated reporting, as you know. So the idea is, what is the meaning of connectivity in the light of reporting on intangibles? Same thing for conciseness. What it means conciseness when you report on intangibles, comparability, and future orientation. in all these 5 reporting principles, we didn't want to redefine them again to create more confusion in the market. We just, the definitions that are already in the framework, integrated reporting framework, are fine. What we try to do is just to adapt them to the context of reporting on intangibles. Hope it's clear. Okay, final chapter. We define what is a KPI. Very often, many people, many documents talk about KPIs, but we thought that was useful to have a general definition as numeric related to critical material factors of value creation, and which should provide objective evidence of performance trends. One KPI for 1 year is not particularly relevant. What is relevant is the trends, by tracking them over time. One important element is that KPIs should be integrated with the narrative explanation of the organizational strategy. So basically, the idea is to not to have only KPI, not to have only narrative explanation or narrative disclosure, but to integrate the two. This would reinforce very much both the KPI, both the numerical figures, and the narrative explanation. Of course, there are KPIs that tells you something about the past, but there are other KPIs, and these are called lagging KPIs, the last words here of the slide. And there are, of course, leading KPIs, KPIs that tells you something about the future. Customer satisfaction is, of course, something telling you about the past, but even more so about the future, because if the customers are not happy, there's a declining happiness about from the customers. It's not difficult to predict some problems in the revenues, in the revenue streams in the future. So there are lagging and leading aspects for KPIs. KPIs, there are 3 general types. There are 3 categories of KPIs. There are general KPIs, customer satisfaction, just said. I think it's a good example. All the industries, all the organizations are interested about customers, their own customers. There are industry-specific KPIs. So for various industries, for various sectors, there are specific KPIs that are well recognized in their sector. For instance, think about in the department stores, one of the typical KPI can be, for instance, revenues per square meter. Revenues per square meter would be financially expressed KPI because revenues are financially expressed. But they are very well recognized. But for instance, in restaurants, rate of turnover, times the tables of the restaurant turn during one evening, for instance. So there are industry-specific KPIs. And of course, there are organization-specific KPIs that are unique to that, specific to the organization. If you want to find some industry-based examples of industry-based KPIs, you can go also to our website, where for some industries, we proposed KPIs that are typical of that industry. It's for free, it's a public service. These are the industries that we offer in the KPIs for, in terms of guidance to represent value creation with a focus on intangibles. So you can see electronic components, pharmaceutical, automotive, telecommunication, technology, mining, fashion, electricity, and so on. Just to give you a very quick example in 1 minute, this is the KPIs for the fashion and luxury. Clearly in India, I think fashion is becoming more and more important as a sector. And so what we did here is basically to breaking down the value creation process in, you see on the top, brand management, style, design, production, distribution, service factoring, and on the left-hand side, the major intangibles that are needed for value creation in that particular industry of fashion and luxury. You see talent quality, customer relations, innovation, trusted partnering, organizational flexibility, efficient and reliable execution of strategy. So for each of this crossing, if you want, we identified a number of possible KPIs. This is completely voluntary, and each organization has to select the best KPIs that best represent its value creation over time. So they are just examples. They are not, please, I know there are many. And for each of them, there's a description in the document you will find on our website there's a description with on the right-hand side, suggested relevance. So some KPIs are less important probably. In some cases, you must have these KPIs if you want to understand the role of intangibles in the value creation process of your company. Okay, it's just a document. It's outside the framework, but it accompanies the framework. It complements our framework. So coming back to our framework, the suggested structure for intangibles reporting, there are 3 possible sections: outline of business and management philosophy, intangibles and value creation from past to present, and a 3rd section from present to future, intangibles and value creation from present to future. Once again, these are suggested structure because I remind you that it's principle-based, our framework is principle-based, so clearly these are possible ways to organize information on intangibles. The important thing is that our framework offers guidance and examples for each of these 3 sections. So it's a little bit different from integrated reporting framework, and this also IRC recognizes this to us because we offer some guidance. I'll give you some examples for the 3 sections. There are more examples, of course. There are just 3 I chose randomly. For intellectual capital management philosophy, you have degree of internal penetration of management principles. You have the figures, you have the implication. Intellectual capital value creation, past to present, degree of R&D concentration, description, and implication. And finally, from present to future, number of patents with economically meaningful remaining terms or life. Okay, so but there are many of those. So I think this might be useful also for integrated reporting, frankly. Appendixes. One appendix, we explain the difference of the terminology. It's a terminological difference, really, between our concept of organizational capital. You see the top of capital on the right-hand side, organizational capital, which is used in our weak intangibles reporting framework. And on the other side, on the central, there's the intellectual capital, which is the terminology used by international IR framework. But believe me, it's not a substantial, it's more a definitional aspect. And of course, you have human capital, you have social relational capital in the IR framework, and relational capital for us. The other appendix, another example just in front of your eyes of an appendix taken from a Japanese company that adopt KPIs and intangibles reporting for explaining innovation process. This is called 3M Japan. This is the name of the company, 3M Japan. And you see they created a logic tree, what they call the logic tree, where there are different KPIs connected to one to the other, explaining basically the innovation process of this Japanese company. And we thought that this is in the framework. So we thought it was a useful example of how you can connect KPIs on intangibles. There's also glossary, I said. For instance, this definition of non-financial. Sometimes non-financial is not clear what it means. We wanted to make sure that what we mean by non-financial can be understood also by stakeholders. So non-financial does not mean that a measure of information does not have a financial impact. Basically, non-financial means that it has a financial impact. It's non-financially expressed. It's not expressed in monetary units. Conclusions. I think I want to leave 15 minutes for discussion. So we're clearly moving. If you look at the whole system around reporting, intangibles reporting, and also sustainability reporting, we're moving towards new systems for corporate information linked to value creation and articulating on non-financial information or KPIs. Clearly, what we try to do is to move along this avenue, trying to provide some more insightful representation report of intangibles and the value creation mechanism. For us, representing and report intangibles implies, by definition, that you improve the reporting on the value creation mechanism. And of course, we want to stress the fact that the wiki is a good development also for integrated reporting practice. Finally, what we try to do, as I said, is not to reinvent the wheel. We try to systematize conceptually what was already there, putting it in a conceptually consistent document. In this sense, if you want, innovation can come from conceptual systematization. We try to have a little bit of innovation coming from systematizing what is already there. And just as a final joke, if you want, we have an illustrious historical antecedent to with the same approach. Many of you may know this guy, but many of us probably should be grateful to this guy because we have a job for this guy, because of this guy. This is a famous Luca Pacioli, the guy that systematized double entry bookkeeping in 1494 in Venice, in Italy, and basically helped a lot to spread over double entry bookkeeping around the world. So that's why I said many of us, even including professors of accounting, should be grateful to this person. What he did not invent double entry, but he simply systematized what was already there. So more modestly, we try to do the same. We try to systematize in a solid but consistent way basic concept reporting practices on intangibles, just to analyze it, to better express the organization's unique value creation story and mechanism. So thank you very much for your attention. I hope it's been clear to you.
Stefano, that was very, very helpful. I have a few questions. If you don't mind, I'll just get into it straight away.
Sure.
Sure. So I'll just tell you the couple of questions we have, and you can choose kind of how to go through it. So the first one is, when you talk about intangibles and reporting, have you kind of, in your experience, worked with the readers or the users or investors, and how they look at intangibles? And if you can share some light on that. The second one is a little bit more on explaining the leading and lagging indicators, I believe. And the third question is more from an academic standpoint, is now, do you, traditional accounting and business accounting especially is very focused on financial management and accounting principles. So do you advocate kind of, inclusion of such topics for the future generations to kind of have this idea as they, from an academic standpoint, as they come into profession, to start looking at intangibles and incorporating it into the regular reporting?
Okay. Thank you for your question. Thank you for your patience to follow this long presentation, but hopefully it's been tried to be comprehensive. Intangibles reporting, investors are very interested in that. Two weeks ago I was in Frankfurt, invited by the German financial analysts to talk about exactly this topic. It is a very similar presentation. And I got many people, many financial analysts coming to me after, giving me the card and let me know, please, the developments on this. In 1 month's time, again, I will be in Frankfurt, invited by the European financial analysts this time, talking about exactly the same topic. So clearly, financial analysts have an interest in this. Maybe, we don't call it intangibles. Let's call it strategic resources. Let's call it value creation mechanisms. I think we should be, aware that maybe terminology might be different, but in many respects, when you want to talk about long-term value creation of a company, and of course many intangibles are interested, many financial analysts are of course interested in that, you can't avoid this topic. It's as simple as that. So financial analysts are interested in having information on the strategic resources, which I call intangibles, explaining long-term value creation, for sure. I mean, clearly in Europe, but it's spreading also in many other contexts. Leading and lagging indicators, I hope not to be confusing. Generally, a lagging indicator is an indicator that provides information on what has happened. A leading indicator is an indicator about something that happened today, recently, but has the potential to tell you something about the development in the future. That's why I was talking about customer satisfaction. Customer satisfaction has clearly something that happened now, but has a potential to tell you what might be the revenue stream, the relationship with the customers, that is of course an intangible, in the future. So in this respect, customer satisfaction clearly has a leading nature. Other indicators are just explain basically just what happened. If I say research and development expenses, research and development expenses, this is a fact about the what happened already. So it's a lagging indicator. Doesn't mean that research and development expenses will be the same in the future. Customer satisfaction tells you something about what is the likely, what is the probable evolution in the future of your relationship with the customer. So that I understand that there's a subtle difference, but it's not necessarily so fundamental. But I mean, technically, there's a difference between leading and lagging indicators. Finally, in academic and professional terms, I think we need to wake up. I'm talking to my colleagues here. Clearly, in our financial accounting will never die, clearly, so we will always need financial accounting, but we need accountants with a much wider perspective. So we don't have a problem necessarily with financial accounting, we have a problem with accountants. And we need to form at the universities, we need to form, of course, accountants that are much more well understanding, the different perspectives. Okay? I can hear a little bit of a Rushali. Is it okay? Hello? Hello? Can I go on? Anyway, as an example, in my courses, I have one course. I teach international accounting standards, so very technical stuff. But the last year, the 5th year of economics and management, I teach these things: intangibles, integrated reporting, because I want to have my students to have a perspective on financial accounting, to know the technical stuff, but know also about integrated reporting, which for me is the future. Same thing also in professional terms. I collaborate with the Chartered Accountants of Scotland, the Scottish Chartered Accountants, and clearly also planning to incorporate these topics in their professional training. So it's changing. Will take maybe 4 or 5 years, but my recommendation to my academic colleagues is to absolutely go in that direction, because we believe, and I'm not the only one, that this will be the future for reporting for companies really in the near future.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Stefano. That was useful, and I think that's a good piece of advice, especially for the academia, to keep in mind. One last question I have is your website. It has KPI examples. Is it also examples of companies that have done good reporting on intangible capitals? Or is there any reference you can give us to go look for examples?
Right. Thank you for the question. Companies have, over the years, many companies around the globe use the reporting on intangibles, KPI on intangibles, not necessarily in our framework perspective, of course, but there's clearly been a long history in this respect, much longer than integrated reporting. Going, in the past, in '94, I told you about the Swedish company Scandia that for 4 or 5 years issued intellectual capital reporting. Nowadays, in Germany, there are a number of small and medium enterprises in Germany publishing the report on knowledge. This is the way it's called. Report on knowledge. Wissensbilanz in German. And there are a number of companies in Denmark. There are a number of companies in Australia as well. But of course, they're not necessarily reporting on intangibles per se. They are using KPIs on intangibles to integrate basically their disclosure. One important example of reporting on intangibles is in India, Infosys. Infosys, for many years, I didn't know the last couple of years, I lost a little bit track of them, but till 2-3 years ago, they were reporting. They used to have the annual report according to the law, the Indian law, of course, the accounting standards, Indian accounting standards, but also they had a number of important additional reports that were showing basically the value of some of their basic intangibles. They believe the management of Infosys was claiming that the real value was given by the brand of Infosys, which is well known, of course. It's a huge company, as you know. It's about 100,000 employees. Is probably the largest software company in the world. And the value was provided by human beings, people, human resources. And so they tried to make an effort to basically give some account of the value created for the company by the brand and the human resources. So there are a number of important examples, even in India, especially in the in the Bangalore area. But I think what was missing is a document trying to give a sort of a general perspective on the whole topic. And we hope that with this effort with the Wiki Intangibles reporting framework, we can provide a little bit of help to companies to be more structured in this type of information. Intangibles reporting. Also, integrated important reporting on intangibles. The problem is that maybe people are not necessarily so aware of this. But I think we try to offer a contribution for the development of this in the near future.
Yes, and I think that's a very good point, because Infosys they don't do it right now, Professor Stefano, but I think up until 2 years ago, they used the human capital equations to talk about that and kind of show value on their employees, and the present value especially. Yep. And so a lot of this is very important for technology companies and service sector companies that are even in India starting to look at intangible capital. So, well,
absolutely,
with that said,
absolutely.
I think we're almost on time to finish. So again, thank you, Professor Stefano. And I know it's really difficult to explain an already complicated topic through a webinar, but I think it's good to have that information. You've got a lot of resources on this on the website, so we'll go look at that. And then hopefully, if there's any other questions or any further further discussions, and we'll kind of reach across out to you. And thank you very much to all the participants, and for again logging in and spending your afternoon with us. And thank you, Professor Stefano.
Thank you to you, and thank you for your patience. Hopefully, it's been something has come across.
Yes, definitely. And we have the recording, so we'll always kind of revert back and learn a little bit more from it.
Okay, thank you very much then for the opportunity.